Guys, this is going to be a re-edit of one of my original videos, one of the first videos I ever made. And these videos are about me installing some flat fenders on my Jeep. Bear with it. It was a re-edit because the original ones I took with my phone, which had pretty good video quality, but everything else was pretty boring and kind of blah. It was not edited. It was a rough video. It was a 6-part video. I had to break it up into parts because I didn't edit anything on my phone. And it was like 35 minutes worth of video for probably 15 minutes worth of content. So I re-edited it into a shorter video, something that's a little bit easier to follow to end. And I hope you like it. I'm going to do this with a couple of my old videos so that they're easier to watch. Enjoy it. If you did like it, hit the subscribe button. There's not going to be any intros or outros to this video. So I'll go ahead and get it out of the way now. Please subscribe if you can. It does help. I am trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, and that's very important with YouTube's new monetization policy. So please hit the like button. Please hit the subscribe button. If it helped you, if it didn't, then that's fine. Enjoy the video. Come back for more. Check out my channel for more content, and have a great day.
The first step for installing new tube fenders is to remove the fender flares on your stock Jeep. It's pretty self-explanatory. They're just some screws and bolts that hold the fender flares on, along with, in this case, some body cladding, because this is a Sahara edition. The screws that go in most of these bolt holes, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and this one, is this kind. And what you'll need is a 5/16 wrench. This is a ratcheting wrench, or a ratchet and socket, and some vice grips. If you notice, the nut on these is a little plastic rubber rectangle, and those are hard to hold, but with the vice grips, it makes it very easy to hold. These last 3 holes down here, this one, and this one, have this machine screw in them. And that machine screw a lot of times can get a little rusty and be very difficult to remove. They're held in there with nutserts, and those nutserts can spin in the body and make it very difficult to remove. You don't really have to worry about damaging the body because we're going to be cutting all this out and putting in the tube fender. But I didn't want to damage the fender flares because I may want to use them in the future. What you want to do before you actually start this is to soak everything down in PV Blaster or some other type of penetrating fluid. That way, if there is any rust or dirt on them, that it'll help penetrate down there and break them loose. If you notice, the body cladding is held on with these tabs, and those tabs up under the Jeep have nutserts in them as well with those same machine screws. That cladding also goes on with this small channel. That channel is held on with rivets, and I'm just going to grind those rivets off and remove that little channel. I'll be putting some rocker guards, some body armor on here as well, that will cover up those few holes. The only other thing that I had to do was remove the side marker, which just comes off of that one nut right there. Just clips up in there and comes off of that one nut. When I do decide to put the tube fenders on, I'm going to have to figure out what to do with the side markers. I'm probably going to get some LEDs, make some side markers that go underneath the headlights. I'll make another video of me actually cutting the fenders, making a template and cutting the fenders, probably with a Sawzall. Well, I'm one side done with my flat fender install, and as you can see, I got the driver's side done on front and rear. I do have the rear done on the passenger side as well. I didn't videotape any of me putting this on, simply because I was doing it by myself, and it was very difficult to film and put this on more or less by myself. So I will walk you through some of the things I found out by putting on this side that will help on the other side, and definitely help if you decide to do one yourself. Number one, this was the Sahara, so I did have this body cladding that I showed in some previous videos. All you can do is put on rivets, is drill out the rivets, and then pull the piece off. If you have a Jeep like mine that lives a little bit in the Northeast, you might find a little bit of rust. Might be more of a reason to take the body cladding off if you, even if you're not going to do a flat fender install, just to keep it from forming any rust underneath it. You will have holes left over, as you can see. Onto the fender install. Sawzall is your best tool by far. Some of the things I ran into was, because of just a little bit of rust, I had to get new hood latches because these were so corroded. The old ones were so corroded that the bolt that holds them was just turning, and so I had to just cut it off with a Sawzall and get new ones. as what other people have said on this, these 4 bolts back here that hold this part of the fender on are ridiculously hard to get to when you're putting everything back together. So take that into consideration. A couple swivels, a couple of extensions, and you can pretty much do it yourself. I still haven't relocated the lights. My plan is to do away with the side marker completely and then use a JK style light down here. I bought these JK lights, LED lights, that I'm going to put in right there for a front turn indicator and parking lamp. Like I said, side indicator I'm not going to replace. One thing you will run into with these LED lights is it doesn't generate enough load to keep your relay from acting like you have a blown bulb. So there's a relay modification you can do. You can find that on YouTube or on any forum. That'll keep that from happening. Or you could use resistors or any other of several methods to put a load on it. You can say I did break one bolt off because of rust. I did not soak everything in PB Blaster before doing this, and I should have. And I am doing the other side that way. To get to these 3 bolts from the back side, take off your headlight bezel and you can access them. You can kind of see right there. There they are. To cut them down with PB Blaster or some sort of penetrating lubricant, and then scrub them with a brush, and they should come out a lot easier. On to a couple other small things. Number one, these pads you have to pull off your fender, and you're going to have to figure out a way to reuse those, because if you don't, there's no pad there to cause that to be tight, and your hood will start flapping a little bit, just enough to, if you're not used to it, to kind of scare you. But if you put those pads back down, it'll tighten up these hold downs. Some other things I ran into was the battery boxes. You have to do a lot more trimming than what they say to the battery box. I'll kind of show you what I mean over on this side. If you can see down in there, I had to trim that battery box back quite a bit. And you can kind of see, let me see if I can get my camera down in there. You can kind of see right there where the bar is still hitting right there, and that really made lining it up a little bit difficult. I'm going to cut a nice big notch out of that little portion of the other battery box. The rest of it fits pretty well. I will try to film this side, put a tripod up or something and film it to kind of show the cutting process. It's not exact. There's no science behind it. You just cut it back to where you keep the bracket right here. Cut it straight back. When this starts curving in right here, make sure you leave a very slight lip all the way back. And then that whole face just comes right off. And then you have to cut your battery box and the inner fender down to there next to those bolts. All right, I'm gonna start this fender. You're gonna be tempted when you start cutting on this and working to remove this fender to go ahead and loosen all the bolts, or even take all the bolts out before you start cutting. Don't do that. It's easier to cut with all the bolts still in it. It firms it up so it doesn't flop all around, because this will get really floppy when you start cutting on it. And leaving the bolts in just keeps everything nice and firm where it needs to go. Now there will be some times where you have to take some bolts out to get parts of your cuts done, but wait till that time comes before you do it. Realistically, it's tough for me to mark on this black with anything, so I'm just put a tape line down where I'm going to cut. Don't worry about trying to cut it all in one big piece. Just cut it off in little chunks and pieces here and there, and it makes it a lot easier to kind of see where your next cut's going to go. If you got a good long line going, then go ahead and keep cutting, but if you're not sure where you need to cut next, or you're a little bit out of control with your cuts, just cut it in smaller pieces. You're not going to reuse any of this outer fender, so it's okay if you cut it up into pieces. As you can see, I'm cutting this in pieces just to make it easier. Once again, it doesn't really matter what all this looks like. It's all going to be covered up by the new fender. When you start cutting into this part of the fender, it is pressed together there, more than one piece of metal. It does get harder to cut. As you can see, once you start cutting this metal off, it's a lot easier to get to the bolts too. Once you get all this cut, then you'll have to start fine tuning. One thing you will have to do is cut this inner fender right up next to this washer. That's how close you're going to have to get, all the way up. You can kind of see you need to make it match this edge right here. Right now it doesn't. Once you do that, you'll see how the battery box sticks way out. You'll have to cut this whole lip off, and then add an extra notch right here to make sure that bar clears. Of course, as you can see, now I've got this cut off, I can reach these bolts in here. Now would be a good time, if you haven't sprayed enough PB Blaster on the other bolts, to do so. These clips break very easily if they have any rust on them whatsoever. Be careful when you're cutting of all these wires. That's your main wiring harness going to your underhood box. You don't want to cut that, I promise you. Once again, other than cutting this lip really close right here, which I'm going to have to get a lot closer, I'm going to have to get to the edge of this tape right here. That cut's almost done. I have to round off this corner up here and get that whole piece off. So I had to cut this one off too. This thing's made without really a nut on the inside here. It's just kind of wedged in there based on a little square washer that's under it. And as soon as that starts turning, there's no way to hold it. Even if you take this off and get down in there, there's no way to hold it. I did ring off yet another bolt. I got the bottom and the top one out, but that middle one would not come out despite hours of PB Blaster and scrubbing the threads that were exposed to make sure they came out clean. So now I'm ready to start cutting on that and to clean up this corner. Alright, I've started cutting this piece off, and if you noticed, I removed those two inner fender bolts. Those clips broke on my other side, and you don't need them because the bolts that come with the new fenders have nuts with them. Alright, I've trimmed the front down a little bit. Probably have to wind up trimming a little more there. Trimmed the battery box down quite a bit. Maybe a little more there, not sure. Trim this edge down really close. Probably going to have to trim a little more there. Got my 4 bolts out and clips. And that's a pain in the butt because, as you can see, there's 2 pieces of metal there that have holes. And this is a third. Lining up 3 holes for a bolt to go through is a pain in the butt. So now the hardest part of doing this by yourself is test fitting this. Picking it up, putting it up there, trimming, taking it back down, putting it back up, so on and so forth. And then finally trying to get all the holes lined up. All in all, this side's gone a lot quicker. But I'm saying that before I've got it test fitted up, and that's really what took so long last time, was test fitting and getting those 4 inner fender bolts to line all 3 holes up. So I almost got it to fit on the first try. As you can see back here, it's not fitting, and the culprit, you won't be able to see it, is just as I suspected, the battery box. It needs about another 1/4 inch taken off of it, maybe a 1/2 inch, just off that one corner where that bar is. You can kind of see how that doesn't quite match the line, but when you start putting those bolts in, it'll pull it up tight. It's a pretty pliable piece of metal. The 4 bolts that hold this back wall in are damn near impossible to get to. It's all of them. The bottom one's pretty easy and the top one's pretty easy. The other 2 are a little more difficult. These 4 bolts that go right up under here are probably going to be the hardest parts, just because lining those 3 pieces of metal up to get the holes down in there. Those. Trying to hold this up while doing all that, it's kind of a pain. I may get a little jack and jack it into place. Alright, I started a couple bolts up front, as you can see. Of course, I didn't start the one where I broke off. Went ahead and started these 4 bolts. You will notice that these washers are not big enough. They will do for now, but I want to go ahead and get this finished for today, and I can run those up tight and get everything lined up. That way they're easy to take out and put back in. I've went ahead and started the 2 bottom bolts where these 2 body panels will come together. So that's the 4 that's hard to get to. And I've propped this up with a stick because that will sag back down until you get everything bolted up. You could use a little jack right here, and I was doing that, but my creeper, I couldn't get my creeper under there with the jack there. It's about 7,000 degrees out here and probably, I don't know, 9, 10, 1200% humidity. So I am going a little bit slow. So let me start tightening bolts, and I'll finish recording when I start drilling holes. I've got the front bolts tight. You can see that pulled together pretty nicely. I've got these 4 bolts tight. You kind of see how one of them, the washer pulled through. I'm gonna have to get another longer washer, bigger washer, probably for all 4 of them, just to be on the safe side. These 4 bolts that you can barely kind of see down in there are all put in. I will say that once you remove the battery, which by the way you should do every time before you do something like this, I should have done it earlier. You should at least disconnect the battery just in case you cut into a wire or you ground something out you shouldn't. You're not going to get killed by a car battery, but you could get a little shock, and or you could blow a bunch of fuses and relays and be very costly. Taking it out also allows you to get to all that much easier. So now I will come back, get the drill out, drill the holes for this, drill the holes for the last few bolts that go down through there. And I will say, putting those bolts in the backside, if you get you a swivel, it makes things a lot easier. And if you use air tools, it is also a lot easier, especially air tools plus the swivel. Just make sure if you're using air tools that you're using an air ratchet on those little bolts and not an impactor, because you will break a lot of bolts with an impact. So I'll bring out the drill, we'll drill some holes, put some things in, and then put my headlight bezel back in, and then it will at least be drivable once I tie up the auxiliary lights. Alright, drilling these holes will be fairly simple. You can see there's a template there. You can drill a small pilot hole if you like, or not, because of the way that's made. You can just drill right through it. 1/4 inch bit. See if I can do this one-handed. And I did. And it just drills straight through. As you get back here, remember there's 2 pieces of metal to drill through, and that might be a little bit harder. So I'm going to use both hands on the other ones. Alright, I've almost got these done. This is just a little 10mm nut on the back of these Allen head screws. It doesn't take long to get those in. Haven't done this yet. I've got 3 holes to drill to mount this. The good news is that the bracket that we left untouched under here has the 3 holes already in it. So I just drill up through those, and that will put them in the right place here. You can drill pilot holes. Once again, you have the template there. It's just hard to drill a hole in the wrong place. And then it does take a larger drill bit for this. So that 1/4 inch drill bit's not going to do, so I'm going to go grab a different drill bit. Alright, so I lied. I went ahead and did do pilot holes, because then I could, once I drilled the pilot holes with a small bit, I could drill down from the top to get these done. That was a lot easier. The main hole was a 5/16, and these are 1/4. When you're tightening this down, be very careful not to over tighten it. Just get it nice and tight. It does have a locking nut, so you don't have to super duper over tighten it. If you do, you're going to strip out that little washer like I did trying to take off the other one, and that's just going to be a pain in the butt if you ever have to take these off. Which, once again, if you're not in a Jeep that might have any rust or is a newer Jeep, you may not even have to take that light bezel off. I just did it to make sure that those welded on nuts didn't break loose, and I could get the PB blaster down on those nuts. And obviously it needed it, because I still did break one off. Alright, that's it. Aside from adhering the little pads, that's almost done, except for the lights. At least they're on. Let me close the hood here. Alright, now I do like the look. I really do. I think when I get my rock sliders on and get the marking lights on there, I think it'll look really good. There was a few things I could have done a lot different. A few things that if you do it, you might do different. But the main thing I wanted to show is that this could be done just in a random driveway over the course of a weekend fairly easily. I actually did the driver's side at the lake, laying in some dirt and grass. This one I did my driveway, not my garage. I only used the air tools at the very end but the point was to see that it could be done with just a 13mm wrench for most of the bolts. You guess you need a sawzall, a couple blades. I needed a 10 and an Allen wrench for the little small bolts that went right here. I needed a 1/4 inch drill bit, a 5/16 inch drill bit, and a drill. That was about it. 13 wrench and sockets were good. That swivel socket was worth it, or the swivel extension. Oh, and a little star to take the bezel off if you need it, and to take the lights and stuff off. It doesn't take a lot of tools or a lot of know-how, as is pretty obvious. It definitely changes the look of the vehicle. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. It's not that hard to do.